safety and security. In addition to calling on Canada to submit its periodic report, which is overdue, and address the previous correspondence, CERD specifically requested that Canada cease construction of Trans Mountain and Coastal GasLink pipelines unless and until they have the free, prior, and informed consent of Wet'suwet'en and Secwepemc peoples, to prevent and properly investigate all instances of surveillance, intimidation, arbitrary detention, excessive use of force, and forced removals of land defenders from their territories by the RCMP, the CERD unit of the RCMP, and any private security firms hired by pipeline companies. This is in addition to calls that CERD previously made urging Canada to remove the RCMP from Indigenous territories, including other private security and police forces, and also called on Canada to prohibit the use of lethal weapons against these Indigenous land defenders. To speak to all of these issues are the following speakers. Slato, known as Molly Wickham, is the spokesperson for Gidimt'en Checkpoint. Kanahus Manuel, whom you know from Tiny House Warriors, is part of the Secwepemc. Nicole Chavez is an international legal advisor with Indigenous Network on Economies and Trade. Reuben George from the Tsleil-Waututh Nation and also affiliated with the Sacred Trust Initiative. Chief Was from the Gidimt'en clan of the Wet'suwet'en, and Cookpee Judy Wilson from the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. Slato, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you for having me, and thank you so much to everybody who made this possible today. I'm Slato. I hold a supporting chief name in the Cassia Grizzly Bear House of the Gidimt'en clan of the Wet'suwet'en Nation. I'm a mother of 3 children. I've been arrested twice during militarized raids on our own territory. I hold a master's degree in Indigenous governance. I've stared down the barrel of a semi-automatic weapon for upholding Wet'suwet'en law. I homeschool my children according to our ways and on our lands, and I am harassed and surveilled daily by CERD and CGL's private security on my own territory. When I read the 3rd letter from CERD, I felt overwhelmed by the recognition that our experiences are a violation of international human rights and Indigenous rights. The construction of the Coastal GasLink pipeline project and the RCMP's treatment of me and other land offenders is a violation of our humanity as Indigenous people. The laws in Canada are representations of the norms of this society. Domestic laws are used to uphold the values of this country, and the laws currently upheld mirror the laws used to commit genocide against our people, to steal and destroy our lands for profit. They used to threaten arrest to parents for keeping their children out of residential schools. Now they threaten arrest to parents protecting their lands for their children. The fact that Canada frames us as criminals, has illegally arrested us and held us in jails for days in an attempt to normalize the racism in Canada against Indigenous people. The CERD has recognized that this is unlawful and has called on Canada to take immediate measures to stop the criminalization and violence against our people and rectify this situation. The fact that Canada has a special task force, CERD, to assure industry free access to our lands and to criminalize us for exercising our rights to our thousands-of-year-old governance system is an indicator to the world that Canada and BC maintain an abusive relationship towards Indigenous people. It is a clear indication that the governments of BC and Canada intend to use force to push industry through our sovereign lands. International investors should question why militarized police are required if projects like CGL and the Trans Mountain Pipeline in fact had obtained the free, prior, informed consent of the rightful title holders. CERD said that the committee is concerned that the situation described above could deteriorate in detriment to the rights of Secwepemc and Wet'suwet'en peoples, in particular to the rights of our lands and territories, the right to be consulted, and the right to the security of the person. In fact, since our last submission, the situation has deteriorated, and CERD has trespassed onto our Gidimt'en village site daily for over 2 months, sending hundreds of officers into our home sites to illegally detain and arrest people for simply existing on our own lands. This problem will never go away until the governments of this country recognize our inherent sovereignty. The first step is to stop the construction of this project and pull CERD out of our territories immediately. Anything less feeds the normalization of racism in this country and is in direct violation of the convention. Awitsa, Masai.
Thank you so much, Slato. Kanahus, would you like to speak next?
Right, Fakwaita, Kanahus Pesky Manuel Request. Hello, everybody. My name is Kanahus Pesky Manuel. I'm from the Secwepemc Nation. I'm the granddaughter of the late Dr. Grand Chief George Manuel and the daughter of my late father, Arthur Manuel, who are both international leaders for our Indigenous rights and title and self-determination. I'm here calling you from Tiny House Warriors, an occupied village site that we've taken back to reclaim our land and assert our title and rights to stop a Trans-Mountain man camp and pipeline here within our territory. The human rights violations that we've received at the hands of the Canadian government are just multiple arrests that are taking place against Secwepemc land defenders who are standing up, occupying their own lands, exclusively using and occupying their own lands, which is their right. And what they're facing is constant harassment by the police. Like Slato said, it's the CERD, the Community Industry Response Group, that's really responsible on behalf of the RCMP pushing this. This is the E division of the RCMP. And they have nonstop surveillance on our site. This is a new unit specifically invented to deploy against the Secwepemc and the Wet'suwet'en land defenders. Here in so-called British Columbia, we're in a very unique situation, and CERD, the United Nations human rights body, actually recognizes our very unique situation pertaining to land here in so-called British Columbia. We have never signed treaties with the colonial governments, not Great Britain, Canada, nor British Columbia. So our lands, our title territory remains unceded. And this is the big question. Do these pipelines have the free, prior, informed consent of the Indigenous people to come and usurp lands, to destroy lands, to build a pipeline on unceded lands? And no, they do not. And these international bodies recognize this. But when Indigenous people stand out to exercise and assert their rights, their inherent rights to land, their constitutional protected rights here in Canada for land, and the international human rights to land and self-determination, they are served with arrest, enforcement of injunctions, jail time, and when they're arrested, they're assaulted, like myself, who has received multiple injuries at the hands of Corporal Bowden with CERD and the RCMP. We are denied medical attention in hospitals. We're denied lawyer calls, and these are considered torture tactics in the international arena. We're assaulted by the police. We're assaulted by the private security guard. We have hate crimes happening by regular Canadian civilians. My truck was stolen from the camp and rammed into a house that I had fled into. No charges have been laid against these people with this vehicular assault and the theft of my vehicle. This is not our first confrontation with Canada. I was involved with the Native Youth Movement, who has faced off with the Canadian government at the Sun Peak Ski Resort. And I faced jail time. They arrested me as I was nursing a 3-month-old baby. They held me for almost 4 months inside Burnaby Correctional Center for Women and denied me access for my child until I had to fight for access to my child with the warden, the prison warden. This is how far we go to fight for our human rights. Right now, I got acquitted for a charge that happened at one of the Tiny House Warriors' homes, and now charging and have a formal lawsuit against the RCMP. We're not scared or fearful to go international. That's the only way that we're going to get our rights and our title recognized. Here in this country, we've exhausted pretty well all of our legal and domestic remedies here in Canada to go international, not just to the United Nations, but also to the international banks, insurance companies, financiers, credit rating agencies, to express the human rights violations that are happening in Canada. And these other international institutions are recognizing that human rights are being violated here in Canada, and insurance companies are starting to walk away from this project, financiers, etc. So by us voicing our human rights violations at the hands of Canada is working to help us assert our rights and our title to the land, to get the recognition that we need as nations, actual Indigenous nations in the world that deserve as much respect as other nations like France, like Hungary, like Germany. We as Secwepemc and Secwepemc Uluk deserve that exact same respect as humans and our human rights here in our nation. Kuksjam.
Thank you so much, Kanahus, for those important words. Nicole, would you be able to go next?
Of course. So what you just heard from Slato and Kanahus is the evidence upon which CERD actually based its very recent decision. The November 2021 submission by the Wet'suwet'en and Secwepemc is available, as is the decision and the letter that was just released by CERD on April 29th, 2022, so this year. And I think it is worth actually quoting from the CERD reprimand of Canada and its finding of Canada in violation of international law. So what they say in their decision is, according to the information before the committee, the governments of Canada and the province of British Columbia have escalated their use of force, surveillance, and criminalization of land defenders and peaceful protesters to intimidate, remove, and forcefully evict Secwepemc and Wet'suwet'en nations from their traditional lands, in particular the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Community Industry Response Group, that is CERD, they've just spoken to, and private security firms. The information received specifies in particular that the Tiny House Warriors, a group of Secwepemc women, have been the target of surveillance and intimidation, and that numerous Secwepemc and Wet'suwet'en peaceful land defenders have been victims of violent evictions and arbitrary detentions by the RCMP, the CERD, and private security personnel in several locations since the committee's letter to the State Party dated November 24th, 2020. So basically, what the committee proceeds to refer to is its first urgent warning and early action decision of December 13th, 2019, where it already found Canada in violation of international law in regard to these incidents, and now pointing to a further escalation. You will remember that in that very month, British Columbia passed what you can only call window dressing, UNDRIP legislation that was then obviously already violated. And more importantly, what really has been violated here is international human rights law. And that's what CERD is talking about. We, of course, in 2020, early 2020, then saw violent arrests of Wet'suwet'en. And now what CERD is talking about is the further escalation. And so you have the record and the most recent decision in front of you, as well as the 2019 and 2020 decisions of CERD, and now the recent letter reiterating its concerns and pointing to the escalation of violence. It also reiterates its concern to immediately cease the construction of both pipelines, the Trans Mountain Pipeline and Coastal GasLink, since they lack the free, prior, and informed consent of the respective Indigenous peoples and the proper title and rights holders. And you will hear from representatives in regard to that, as well as you will hear about the escalation of violence, further escalation of violence, and the exhaustion of national remedies, which makes these international bodies all the more important. Because when you have neither effective national remedies in negotiations or in court, which is what the committee also is recognizing, and then you have exhausted a lot of those remedies, as we've seen in court, that's when international bodies will step in even more forcefully. And that's what we're seeing on the part of CERD. And with that, I'll hand it on to the further representatives, and I'm available for further questions if necessary.
Thank you, Nicole. That's an important point about having exhausted all domestic remedies, and we have no choice but to go to the international community. Ruben, would you like to go next, please?
ACM, Hojka CM, CIA, Hojka TCM, Skulutstans, not to Slewitith. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. My name is Ruben George. I'm from the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. You know, the world is changing, and there's two sides that we're dealing with here. Not just here. You look at Canada with the fires and the floods, and at one point Vancouver was cut off from the rest of Canada because of floods. But everything's changing globally, and what we're working towards is protecting within simply our law. Our law. Everything has spirit, and that's what we protect. That's what we protect, and that's what we work towards. And at the other end, and how this colonial system has been suppressing Indigenous people, it's much like what we're going through here today, because the suppressive system that was there is the same system that we're dealing with here now today. And the police and the security are protecting that dysfunctional law that is raising havoc, not just us as Indigenous people, but everybody and our earth and everything that has spirit. So within our law, we created an assessment based on our law. We went to the National Energy Board, we went to the Canadian Energy Regulator, and multiple levels of court we went, and it was treated different. Even when we won, we submitted evidence that was facts, that they recognized as facts, but chose to stand with what they say the best interest of Canada, which was not the best interest of Canada, was the best interest of industry. Was what I'm saying is raising havoc. Even yesterday in court, Will George, standing within our law, guided by elders, was sentenced to jail. The judge didn't even know in the time of reconciliation where Tsleil-Waututh was, and she was sitting in the heart of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. She didn't look at the Gladue report. She made up her mind already when even before it started, much like the National Energy Board, much like the Canadian regulator, much like the Federal Court of Appeal. And this is the problem that we're dealing with. All we want and what we need and what we require and what this international governing body is saying is treat us fair. If you treat us fair and look at the facts, everybody would be better off. We said this before, when we win, everybody wins. Even them. When they win, everybody loses, including them. And that's the change that we want to create, is save what we have. Look how much has died. Look how much is going away. This is working within our law. You know, and it's a problem. It's like the TMX, as we know already, is going to be stranded asset. Their initial cost was looking at it way back in 2013, 14. It would take 20 years to pay off. Yesterday, as my cousin was in court, Canada, they came out and said they're going to guarantee a $10 billion loan. Now $24 billion to a stranded asset, saying that they're not going to spend any more of taxpayers' money, public money, but that's still going to be a debt that everybody's going to have to take care of. And the stranded asset. And working towards green energy, it's going to be obsolete. That's some of their own federal Canada studies have shown. For the best interest of everybody and everything, especially our law and our livelihood and our reciprocal connection to spirit of all those things that we love. So thank you, my beloved relations, for standing not just for our own people, but for everybody. I thank you so much, and I raise my hands to you in the good work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruben. Chief Was, are you able to go next?
Yes, I am. My name is Was. I am the head chief of the Cassia, the Grizzly House of the Gidimt'en clan of Wet'suwet'en. The government of Canada, since it came around our land, continue to be a real problem. They don't sit down. They don't sit down eye to eye, and when they do, they lie right through their teeth. They lie through their papers. They lie through their RCMP, their goons. They push us around, but we're not going to move. The simple message that we have is that we're going to protect the water, the wildlife, and our ways of life. We're never going to leave. We're not going to leave that behind. We're there for our children and our grandchildren, and yet they're yet unborn. The government of Canada, right now, as it stands, is at its highest in hypocrisy. They do this and do that for the international stage, and yet behind closed doors in their own backyard, so to speak, our backyard, they continue to push us around, to be ignorant toward our culture. It's horrendous. This is 2022. And nothing has changed ever since they came. They continue to kill us. They continue to rape our women. And they continue their onslaught of the genocides that they started back then. It's still going on. The reason why I say that is because they cover up all of this through their laws. It's about time that people know about this. We're not any different from our nations, our brothers down south, the Guatemalans, the South American natives down there. We are no different up here. They're still continuing to kill our young men on the streets. This is still happening. People need to know about this. And out here, while we're still trying to protect our water, our land, the industry is just coming in, flashing their cash, doing their damage, and then taking back off to the big cities. That's what they're doing. And yet they continue to divide our people amongst us. They pay off people. They pit our own people amongst each other so that we end up fighting. We recognize that already. Canada has always been like that. And we're not afraid of them. However this is going to turn out, the international message is that they need to sit down with us in a proper way. They need to sit down with us and sign a peace treaty with us because they continue to kill us. Mm-hmm. That's the message that we have for Gidimt'en. Not to say that we're going to have arms or anything like that. We're a peaceful people. We'll continue to be peaceful. It is them that come in with their guns pointed at us. It is them that they have these heavy militarized style pushing us around, pushing people around, pushing women around, women that are pregnant. And this is happening. People need to know this. This is not something that we made up or something that I have a scripted right up here. I don't have any script. This is coming from the heart. This is coming from me. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm telling you. If people can deliver this message to whoever in the international stage, so be it. Whatever you're going to do with it, I'm sure there's humankind out there somewhere. I'm sure there's humans out there somewhere that can recognize, that can see what is happening and say to these people, stop this racism, stop this killing. Yes, it's a good anger that we have, but we're not afraid of anybody. Wet'suwet'en will never run. Wet'suwet'en will never surrender. We're still here. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you so much, Chief Was, for those powerful words. And for our last speaker, could be Chief Judy. Are you able to go next?
Yes, thank you for this press conference today on the importance of what's happening to the criminalization of our land defenders in their unceded territories. So basically, it's called to Canada to cease the construction on the pipelines. And Canada is directly, as a state government, bound by human rights obligations. And we can see that we have a long-standing record of bringing those Indigenous land rights issues to the United Nations, the CERD submissions, and also the other 7 covenants that Canada has signed. We continue to file these reports. And with the pipeline, there hasn't been, as you heard, any free prior informed consent. So those are violations in itself from the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And since Canada owns the Trans Mountain Pipeline, these human rights obligations apply to those states. And Canada must stop the construction because they're further violating those human rights obligations. And just the funding of it, and then as was pointed out, the increased gas emissions that it's causing right from the tar sand oil is also going in a direct contradiction from Canada saying it's a climate leader. So you cannot have say that you're investing billions of dollars and guaranteeing $10 million loans to a pipeline that causes so much gas emissions. And also, in BC here, we've had the worst climate crises in our history. We had 4 atmospheric rivers. We've had flooding as a result of it. We've had wildfires. We had a heat dome. Those are all climate crisis driven, which is mankind driven from these type of projects. So we really have to, as people in this country, have to really question ourselves: is that the direction we're going to continue to want our government to go into? I was over in Glasgow and I heard, Canada is doing all these things, but I thought, wow, that's not true, because I can see what's happening in my own territory, the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and also, the Coastal GasLink that's happening, in the Wet'suwet'en, who own their territory. It was a Dalgamo case that decided that, in Canada is 25 years hasn't recognized that. So that's really a human rights violation as well. So we have all of these human rights violations compounding. And I think today we wanted people to hear that, people to understand that. We hear about the different countries happening, in all the different wars in the other countries and how they're treating their land defenders. But this is happening right in our own country, to the land protectors, to the water protectors, to the young people, who are standing up and vocalizing, their protection to against the climate change, wanting to protect what we have and keep it in the ground, not to continue the climate crisis and perpetuating it. And we have, our land defenders like Swace and Will George in court and being sentenced, and the judge not even reading his Gladue report, as was mentioned. So we have a long way to go, and our people are not giving up. The people are still standing up for their basic human rights, which is recognized in Canada under the UN Declaration and in British Columbia. So, with the country visits with the United Nations coming up this year is going to be very important with the special rapporteur, and also with the, the MRIP body and, the other ones that will be coming through, because the people need to tell There's stories like the truth, as Chief Wu said, right from his heart, because they see this on a daily basis, the degradation of the water and of the land, and it's for only industry. So Canada cannot base decisions on just the industry. They need to base the decisions on the future, which the land defenders and water protectors are saying that they're doing. So, Canada is in clear violation of international law and also against the basic human rights under both the federal and provincial legislation with free, prior, informed consent, and also in what they're doing to criminalize our people. Sending in militarized RCMP is unacceptable, and it shouldn't be done at all to our people who have been on the land and who are owners of the land, who are trying to protect everyone from the climate crisis and all the decisions the industry is making, which Canada now is the owner of the pipeline. So they're actually looped in with, the industry because they actually own the tar sands pipeline, which is the world's worst polluter. Thank you. That's all I could say for now. And I think there's more in the press release. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cookbee Chief Judy. And now you've all heard from these very powerful speakers about the very clear links between the genocide of Indigenous peoples and the ecocide of the earth, which doesn't benefit anybody. And it's important to understand that these land defenders are actually out there protecting all of you. So we are ready to take any questions. If there's any in the, just put them in the question and answer session. Okay, so the first question is by Lindsay Newman from Vista Radio. She has a question for Chief Was. Has there been any further negotiation with the province in Canada in regards to the MOU that was signed in 2020? Go ahead, Chief Was.
No, there hasn't, due to the fact that the approximately 2 weeks after the signing of the MOU, well, not even 2 weeks, the RCMP came in and they invaded our space, and then this totally sidetracked the entire process of this MOU. So there was no further discussions. There was people that just walked away from it, and the first thing that we said was there's a big white elephant in this room before we talk further on the MOU, and that big white elephant is the CGL. And as soon as we said that, they walked away, and so no, there hasn't been any further discussions. Right now, I'm open to sit down with them. It's just a matter of, I think they're just buying time for this CGL to go through our territory. That's what their tactic is right now.
Thank you so much, Chief Was. Is there any other questions from the media? Just put it in the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom, your name, which media outlet you're affiliated with, and to whom you're directing the question. And we'll give a few minutes for people to type their questions. In the meantime, I did go to question not through here, but through social media, and it was directed to Slato. And the question was, what's at stake if we don't stop these two pipelines and that the breach of Indigenous rights continue? What's at stake for both Indigenous peoples and Canadians?
Yeah, thank you for that. There's a lot to, we've seen conflicts with Indigenous people and the state in Canada in the past, in our history, that have resulted in huge crises. Look at the 2020 shutdown of Canada, of major infrastructure. We look at the Oka crisis, in the 90s, and look at all of these different crises that have come up over the years. And the more that industry in Canada collude to violate the rights of our people and to violate our human rights and to bring violence, the worse the crises are going to grow until it will get to a point where nobody can get away from them. It will get to a point where it has to be dealt with. People have been killed over crises over land. And this is something that we want to avoid. We don't want to see those kinds of crises happen again. But we will not stand down, and we absolutely have to make sure that this happens. In particular, in Wet'suwet'en territory, the Wet'suwet'en is one of the last clean drinking water sources in our territory. It's the sacred headwaters to our spawning salmon. And this is something that CGL wants to drill underneath imminently. Like, this is something that's coming up right away that could devastate all of the populations downstream, all of the salmon populations, all of the people that rely on tourism as an industry, on forestry as an industry, on all of fishing as an industry. You know, this is not just about economic gain. It's costing everybody. Destroying these lands. And so we have to look at the climate crisis. We have to look at the crises between Indigenous people and Canada and the RCMP that will grow if these things are not addressed and rectified.
Thank you so much, Slato. The next question we have is from Matt Simmons from the Narwhal. The question is for Slato or Kanahus. Can you speak to the relationship between the RCMP, specifically the CERD unit, and industrial companies?
Sure. So I'll speak and then I'll let Kanahus speak, just because this is such a current event that's happening in Wet'suwet'en territory. The RCMP, the CERD unit, are publicly colluding with private industry on a daily basis. There's private security, Forsyth Security, that's parked outside of the Gidimden Village site that regularly patrol my home. The other day, as an example of this collusion, the Forsyth Security was instructing the RCMP officer how to get to my home. They have been parked outside of my driveway. They pulled me over twice 2 days ago and then showed up at the top of my driveway just to enjoy the view. And so this is the kind of information that they're sharing with each other. They have regular meetings right outside of Gidimden checkpoint where they're sharing information with one another, private security is telling the RCMP where people are moving throughout the territory, when and how they're getting from A to B, instructing the RCMP to go and pull certain people over. And this is on the micro level. We know from experience that there has been, and from FOIs, that they're communicating back and forth between the RCMP and TC Energy and Coastal GasLink. And so we have evidence of that has been going on this whole time. CERD is, if they're not being paid by CGL directly, they have a very close relationship and take direction from them.
Kanahus, do you have anything to add?
Yes, the Community Industry Response Group worked directly with Trans Mountain Pipelines and their security. They work directly with Coastal GasLink. Because of this lawsuit that I have against the RCMP, I have the disclosure of the interview against the RCMP, who has admitted that on their first meeting at their first Community Industry Response Group, after the first hiring of their first group of individuals, RCMP, they were debriefed about Kanahus Manuel, myself. I'm a Secwepemc mother. I'm a midwife. I deliver babies. I'm a traditional tattoo artist. I'm a resource for traditional medicines and healing in my nation. And for them to have their first meeting, a debrief about myself, was very concerning and very scary, in fact. The Community Industry Response Group worked directly with the these private security who are actually RCMP, and because we have trials and disclosures, we're finding, and because these security actually go up onto the stand against us for the Crown, are admitting that they have 25 plus years RCMP experience. Some of them trained sniper trainers that are now working for Trans Mountain Security and work directly with the community industry response group. This is very concerning because I've seen it multiple times before at the Sun Peaks fight, at the Imperial Metals Mount Poly mine disaster fight, where the province, the federal government, all levels of ministries and colonial civil servants, including the colonial police force, work together and actually say we. And so these groups of people, you know, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Energy and Gas, BC Oil and Gas Commission, you know, all levels of provincial and federal governments are working directly with the RCMP, meaning Community Industry Response Group, because someone had to invent it and make this up to specifically position them against Secwepemc and Wet'suwet'en land defenders. That's their job. No one else is fighting this pipeline as much as we are on the ground. We've been here for years. I've been here for 4 years. The Wet'suwet'en have been there for like possibly 10 years on the ground fighting Coastal GasLink. We see firsthand, because these guys are high-fiving themselves right at our blockade, like Slato said, talking, having meetings. Of course, they work directly. We need journalists to come up and document just specifically the work of Coastal GasLink and these private security firms against Indigenous people.
Thank you so much, Kanahus. And I think it's important for everyone to on the line to understand that the RCMP pensions are also invested in TC Energy, the parent company, as are public government pensions, heavily invested in oil and gas. The next question we have is from Brenna Owen with the Canadian Press. I know this has been asked many times, but I wonder if Slato or Kanahus would mind reiterating the response to the Canadian government and industry's assertion that pipeline projects are lawful because they have consultation processes and some certain number of band councils have signed off. So Slato, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think that, that's the age-old question, and this is exactly what CERD is talking about and the international community is talking about, is that it is Indigenous people's right to self-determination and to be self-determining according to our laws, according to our traditional governance systems, and that's what we're doing. When we look at the decisions made within our traditional clan governance system, there is no division there. Everybody got together over years of meetings to be able to make those decisions together. And then strategically, the government and industry went to band councils to get free, prior, and informed consent when they have no legal standing or authority to be making decisions in Wet'suwet'en territory after the Delgamuukw Stay Away court case recognized the chiefs and our clan governance system as the rightful title holders to our territory. And in addition to that, none of the pipeline goes through any reserve communities. The band councils are responsible for the reserve communities only in our territories, and have recognized that themselves over the years, and are being persuaded and having all of these impact benefit agreements that include gag orders that band councils cannot go back and speak out against the project even after they've made decisions, and there's a new council in 2 years later who may or may not agree with the pipeline project, but they can't go back and say anything about it. And so we are upholding Wet'suwet'en law according to our laws and international laws. And the band councils in our territories have jurisdiction over the reserve community.
Thank you, Slato. Did you want to add anything, Kanahus, or go?
Yes, I'd like to add to that. The federal Indian bands are actually a construct of the federal government itself. It falls within the Indian Act and is actually unilaterally imposed on our people without us agreeing to be a part of this process or this reservation system or this band office system, everything that comes along with that. If you add up all the Indian reserves in Canada, in fact, it would equal 0.2%, not even 1% of land. And these are the 0.2, what my father called the 0.2 chiefs. They're the ones that are the Indian Act, Federal Indian Act, chief and council that govern over the Indian Reserve. And that needs to be very clear, because by going to these federal Indian bands to sign mutual benefit agreements or consultation agreements or MOUs or anything with these industries does not amount to consent. So mutual benefit agreements, they do not amount to consent, and that federal Indian bands are not the title holders to our land. Mm-hmm. They don't hold that title to our land to be making those decisions. It's the Secwepemc people collectively that hold the title to our land. Like this, here behind me is a map of Secwepemc Uluk, 180,000 square kilometers of unceded, unsurrendered territory that Secwepemc people, the mothers and the fathers and the children and the grandparents, the hunters and the fishers and berry pickers of the nation hold that territory collectively, and not a federal Indian band can make decisions on this greater territory. Only on Indian reserves can they make decisions, and even that's debated.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Kanahus. The next question we have is from Dan Messick. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. And it looks like CICK News, theskina.com. The question is for Slato and Chief Was. With the tunneling under the Maurice River imminent and construction continuing, what can the Wet'suwet'en and other people that rely on Maurice River do to stop the construction and the tunneling under the river? What are the land defenders willing to do to stop this?
I can go first. At this point, I think the international stage needs to be aware that this is one of the last of the pristine waters, the headwaters that we're protecting. And the awareness needs to go out that our fish, the salmon, and all that lives in the water and all that depend on the water along the way, the wildlife, the grizzly bears, the caribou, elk, moose, and all the four-leggeds out there, the winged animals, the ducks and all the geese, they depend on this water. And what we're saying is that we don't know what is going on underneath when that tunnel is being constructed right now. But we know what will happen if that thing explodes or if that thing bursts. We know what will happen. It will destroy this river. We know that. And our attempts to let the local people know what the impact of this will be in the future is literally go to deaf ears, because all the local people are depending on this. They got paid off. They're saying that it's jobs, but we're telling them, the jobs can come, but this water, once it's gone forever, it's gone. We're all dead. That's the key message that we need to bring toward the international stage. We're not going to hold up arms. We're not going to say that we're going to defend it and stuff like that. They're the ones who have guns. They're the ones who are pointing at us and telling us, no, don't go here. We're going to do this. We're just merely protecting this as simple as can get. So the people need to be aware that we're protecting the water, the wildlife, and the environment. That's what we're doing. And then our way of life, we're connected to this land, we're connected to this water. And we're doing this for the future generations. Slato.
Go ahead, Slato.
I'll say. I would like to add, as you know, people that are in this area and that rely on this area, like I talked about before, you know, the Wet'suwet'en, the Maurice River, is a world-renowned fishing site. People come from all over the world to come and steelhead fish in the fall. There are so many industries that rely on this territory being healthy, on this river being healthy. And I think that more people in our area and downstream in our area, all of these other industries that rely on the health and well-being of our waters as well, need to speak up, because clearly the provincial government and the federal government don't care about Indigenous people. They are not listening to us. They're violating our rights. They're using violence against us. If other people, if non-Indigenous people in our communities and in the region started to speak up in opposition and say, how does this affect them as well? That's going to strengthen our position. It's not enough to say we support the Wet'suwet'en and we're going to support them in their fight, which is great, but other people need to realize that this is affecting them too. And they also need to stand up, you know, and we are following our laws. And that's what we've always been doing. Every single time the militarized RCMP come in and invade our territories, every time that I've been arrested, every time that I've seen guns and canine units, you know, coming at us, we're standing in our strength and our power under Wet'suwet'en law. And that is what we will continue to do. And Wet'suwet'en law has very strong laws against trespass, against the destruction of our territories and our life systems. Like, this is our livelihoods that we're talking about. This is the livelihoods of everybody downstream. This is the livelihoods of so many Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. And so we, under our law, are required to protect that by any means necessary.
Thank you so much, Slato. I don't see any more questions in the actual box, but if it's okay with everyone on the panel, there's actually some student journalists who would like to ask Kanahus and Ruben a question. So Kanahus, one of these student journalists is saying that you're a human rights award winner. You won the Carol Geller Award in Human Rights specifically for your role as a woman land defender acting peacefully to protect the human rights of other people, and in particular to protect women from the violence of man camps. For people who don't understand that, can you talk about the relationship between man camps and murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls that are associated with these pipelines?
Okay, right where I'm located right now, here at Blue River at the Tiny House Warrior Village, before COVID, they proposed this man camp to be 1,000, to house 1,000 pipeline workers to construct a pipeline. After COVID, they have within their permit that says they're housing 550 men, just right here behind 3 layers of fences that they put up, including electrical fence and razor wire fence, 3 layers of fences to save and protect themselves from us women. But really, what it shows is that that's how they want to switch this around and view us as some type of criminals. In fact, these man camps contribute to murdered and missing Indigenous women. Multiple reports that will prove not just that, but actual human testimonials from in and around the fracking communities and tar sands communities to talk about the increase, including Fort St. James, that said there was an increase of 45% of sexual attacks when the fracking increase happened and man camps were built in and around there. That's been our biggest concern, and the reason why Tiny House Warriors established our village site right here, just millimeters outside of an injunction zone that they have set up just to avoid arrest. But where our presence here is really showing how genocide manifests itself here in 2022 against Secwepemc women who have chosen to exclusively occupy a site to assert our title and rights to this site, to address the man camps and just the invasion and the theft of our land that's still continuing to happen today. These man camps, you see, hundreds of transient men that aren't from here. These are all license plates up from Alberta and Saskatchewan and Ontario. Rarely do you see any British Columbia license plates here going in and out of this man camp site. They're all coming from other provinces. These are transient men that don't have any link to these communities, don't have any accountability to these communities. They leave their wives and their families for weeks and months on end. Right now, there's a private campground right there that has human sex trafficking happening right outside. There's women that are being brought into the camp. We have video footage. We're constantly monitoring that. We have dash cams on our cars that are parked there at our blockade to constantly monitor what's going in and out of the site and really collecting data so we could have data to withstand legal threshold in an international human rights case that we are building against Canada. And this is a part of it with CERD, but constantly documenting what this man camp is bringing into this community. We have tire marks right outside our front entrance to our house where trucks are doing donuts and throwing whiskey bottles and breaking the bottles onto our tiny houses. These are the things that happen. And mind you, I can't even walk around Blue River because I think about the Indigenous woman that got hit by the trailer hitch and end up dying. Mm-hmm. So just to even go for a walk with my dogs in this little quiet town of Blue River is dangerous for me as a land defender because of this man camp here.
Thank you so much. We have about 2 minutes, and Ruben, one of these students hoped you had enough time to answer the question, and I think it's the question most people have. What are you asking Canada and BC to do? And then what can Canadians do to help these land defenders?
We're asking them to do what makes sense. You know, it's as I said, it is a stranded asset. It will take decades and decades to pay it off. It's dangerous, you know, not if, but when a spill will happen. There's 87% chance of a spill going to happen. You know, when that happens, 1 million people will get sick, 500,000 birds will die. We don't have to look or see very far of the destruction it caused in way up north when Exxon Valdez crashed and the water there is still dead. Look at the Gulf of Mexico. All these things are facts. And for what? You know, it's remember, they don't own the oil, they're delivering the oil, and it's 4 times more than what they anticipated the budget to be. So we're just saying, stop it, quit spending taxpayers' money. You know, even the tax of the breakdown of the tax is 35% to Alberta, 15% to Canada, and less than 3% to British Columbia. We're taking all the risk with no benefits. If people just look at it and know that it doesn't make sense, and even if they do their economic assessment of potential investors, they'll find what we found, that it doesn't make sense. It's a stranded asset. So we're saying stop it. And what's the second part of the question?
What can Canadians do to support the land defenders?
Oh, totally get involved. Look at our websites. Look at Tiny House Warriors. Look at the Wet'suwet'en and Molly and all the work that they're doing. Support them. Go to the camps. Be involved. Look for when events are happening. Go right to your local government. All of us here, we started something because we cared, and people thought we couldn't get where we're at because of what we're up against. But most of this started with just a couple people, and now they're international known. Tiny House Warriors and Sato and all our relations are they just started with the idea to try to make something better, and it ballooned up to be an international exposure to it. And look at it's the United Nations that is recognizing that this is wrong. Mm-hmm. It's an international government that is wrong, and that's what the people here did is they made sure that the world sees what's going on here, and how wrong Canada is. You know, I think back in Paris when Trudeau stood up and said, Canada's back. We're gonna be like how it used to be, and he did the opposite. He started approving pipelines, and he's jumping in bed with industry and not taking care of the best interest of Canadians. His not, our future generations, his own kids, is incapable of doing it because they're greed. But all the people here, they will. Mm-hmm. They will take care of everybody's future generations, even his, because it's too dysfunctional to understand that. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for standing up for our rights and our futures, in fact, the life of the planet. Thank you to all of the media who attended and asked questions. As I understand it, if you have specific questions for any of the speakers, you can follow up with them directly. And there's also a specific media contact on the press release, and the letter you already have a copy of. Thank you all for attending. And this closes our press conference. Walalia.